this week's comparison, we're gonna go over dips and decline bench press. So a lot of people like to use these movements interchangeably because they are going to be actually working through similar movement patterns, but I do think it is important to understand where these movements are differing, where they are actually similar, and how we can apply each one of them potentially independently in our training. So the dip. Dip is gonna be a pretty foundational movement, I think. It's, kind of just a side effect of the push-up in a lot of ways, but I love dips. I think that dips are an absolutely phenomenal movement. I use them all the time in my own training. I think they're probably underutilized for most people. I think that a lot of people tend to go for, dumbbell presses, barbell machine presses, and do not utilize dips as much as they should. But the important thing to know about dips is that they are an open chain movement. So with that, you're gonna get a decent amount of instability because your body is just going to be dangling in space. So unlike a push-up, which is closed chain, that dip is going to have a lot of instability, which means that unless you're pretty strong, it's going to be difficult to actually control your body positions to get the most out of the movement. And I can kind of demo that here in a second. And then with decline bench press, we're gonna have a variant of the flat barbell bench press that we know and love. I kind of, MacGyvered this bench to create a decline. If you do not have a declinable bench, you can always just throw a block, a bumper plate under the front, and it's pretty sturdy. But in general, you wanna make sure that the decline is relatively subtle. I know that like a lot of the decline benches that you will see at commercial gyms are fixed at like a 45-degree angle. I think that that is way too steep for what we're trying to accomplish here. I don't think that most people are gonna get much out of a 45-degree decline because the range of motion is just not very long with a barbell. That's where dips actually come in. So we'll touch on that in a second. But decline bench press is an interesting movement. I don't actually personally use it too frequently in my own training or even my clients' training, but I think that it is potentially something that can be a great accessory for the barbell bench press if you're working for strength purposes or even just, like hypertrophy through your pecs, your triceps, and things like that. But coming back over here to the dip, the most important thing, in my opinion, is the full range of motion capabilities of the dip because we're not gonna be limited by a barbell touching our chest. So that is gonna be extremely important for not only our mobility, but also our potential for pec and tricep development, which is really what the dip is going to be awesome with. So another thing with the dip is you're gonna have a neutral or a semi-neutral grip. So that's gonna be much better on not only our wrists, but also our elbows and shoulder joints. So just much more natural, better aligned, gonna take a lot of stress off of those joints. So with the dip, it's gonna be important to control your torso angle so that you're not straight up like this, trying to perform the dip like this. You wanna make sure that as you're performing the eccentric, you actually push your chest and your torso angle down to create something that actually resembles more like a decline press. So here, if done right, that tension through your pecs at the bottom of the dip, whenever your torso angle is dropped a bit, is going to be pretty similar to what you're experiencing with the decline press. The big difference again is that neutral grip and also the ability to get deeper than the bars here. Whenever coming over here to the decline bench press, this is going to be a little bit of a difficult movement for most people, especially for those people with short legs. I actually am not a huge fan of anchoring your legs in any kind of like thigh or shin pads, like what you'll see with the non-adjustable benches. Those just do not provide any stability whatsoever. You're gonna lock yourself in, but your torso and your abdomen are going to be completely lax compared to what you would get if your feet are on the floor like this. But again, unless you have long feet or long legs like me, you might be at a disadvantage there, but setup and execution are going to be basically similar to a flat barbell bench. So you're here, you lock everything in, again, bringing it down to your lower chest or even upper abdomen, and then pressing back up. If you have a keen eye, you will note that that range of motion is actually much shorter than a flat barbell bench press. And the reason for that is because the natural arc of the decline press is going to come in contact with more of your upper abdomen, which is naturally going to be a little bit more elevated on the decline press. So while the decline bench press and the dip are both going to train similar force vectors and similar paths through your pecs, the decline bench press is going to be severely limited in the range of motion you're able to achieve versus the dip. That might be good if your goals are purely strength and load focused, but if your goals are more hypertrophy through the triceps, pecs, even anterior delts, or mobility, I would say dips might be your best bet there. Both of them could potentially have interesting use cases in a program. The decline bench more as like a supplemental movement for a flat bench press or even an incline bench press, I would say. The dip, probably just an overall great movement for most people who don't have elbow or shoulder pain. But again, this is something that even though you can do it with body weight, you can do it assisted, you can do it weighted, you're going to have to still be careful with accentuating or exaggerating that stretch at the bottom. Because if you don't have that mobility through your pecs, through your shoulders, you are putting yourself at a little bit more risk of injury for straining or even tearing a pec, which we do not want. So, wrapping it all up, I wanted to compare these movements because I think that they're interesting from the perspective of the direction of force. They're both very similar in that line of press, but as we've seen, dips get and allow more range of motion. Those flat barbell or the decline barbell bench is going to be very restricted. So integrate this into your program or integrate these movements into your program according to the strengths and drawbacks that were highlighted here. But I think it is important to be able to utilize each of them independently and effectively after being able to segregate their own use cases and drawbacks, while also making sure that you understand everything that goes into both movements, being able to compare and analyze the good and the bad.